Hello everybody and welcome back to this week's video. And in this week's video we're going to carry on to talk about the chapter 48 of the Jeremiah book. So without further ado, let us begin with this week's video. Thank you the Lord through our Saviour, Jesus Christ. So before we look at the next chapter, of course, in the Jeremiah book, that being the 48th chapter, let us look at a recap of what we saw in the 47th chapter and how that connects to the 48th chapter. So in Jeremiah chapter 47, it's spoken about the judgment that is to take place on the Philistines. Clearly, that's what it talks about. It talks about the judgment the Philistines would experience. It showed that when God's appointed time comes, no nation can stand by its own power, he says. The Philistines were troubled by invasion, fear, and destruction. And this is how the chapter is showing God's penultimate power is supreme over any so-called world power that deems itself to be rulers of completeness or of complete power. And then when we see how the chapter 47 ends with showing God's divine power, 48th chapter continues this message by turning to another neighboring nation, that being Moab. And that's what we're going to be discussing about in this week's video. So let's begin. So Moab was a people or type was a people, of course, who often lived with pride and trusted in their own wisdom, riches and in their strong cities, we can see. And in this chapter, God declares judgment upon them because they became proud and careless towards him. They didn't have that esteemed faith towards the Lord, but rather had more of their own self-confidence as a priority over the Lord's faith, we can see. And this chapter begins with sorrowful news for the site of Moab itself. As one city after another faces destruction, the people cry, flee, and mourn because the enemy is coming upon the land. Even strong places cannot protect the people of Moab, we can see. And as a key lesson, it appears in verse 7 of this chapter, where it says, Moab trusted in its treasures and accomplishments, we can see. And because they believed in their prosperity that would save them, they were given the experience of where true power lies, as earthly wealth and human strength could not protect them from the judgment that was installed into them for the actions they had caused. And this reminds us that true security does not come from money, success, or human ability, we can see, but from trust in God, trust in the Lord, letting the Lord's will be the decision that is to be made, letting the Lord's will control how you act, make you act in the right manner. It's that trust in God that gives you the strength to be supported and stay strong no matter where you fall or rise. As another important point alongside this is then shown in verse 11. Moab had been at ease from youth, we can see. And this picture is like wine, we can see, left resting without being poured from vessel to vessel, we can see. It's completely restless, almost, we can say. Because of this ease, we can say, Moab became settled and self-satisfied and unchanged with the power and strength they so-called had. Spiritually, this teaches us that life without testing or correction can lead to pride and spiritual weakness. Trials often help develop humanity and faith, we can see. And it's through that self-awareness and wrongdoings that we do that allows us to grow and understand that we always have to keep on changing the mistakes that we do to allow ourselves to rise up to the position he has asked us to be. So we see that this is what the verses speak of. And we can see another verse that speaks about Moab's place's actions. As we see in verse 29, it emphasizes about the pride of Moab. The nation became haughty and arrogant. Pride was the root of many of their problems. And this shows that God's punishments are not only to destroy, of course, we've discussed this before when it came to Israel's case as well, that it wasn't only to destroy, but also teach it lessons and eventually provide opportunities of recovery. And God here is teaching them that lesson of pride is the downfall of any human, and because of that pride, they are now being undergoing this judgment despite how strong they are in that human strength way. And so seeing all of this, we can see that even in judgment, God shows mercy. We can see this. The final verse gives us hope that in later days, Moab will regain and receive blessing and restoration with the Lord's support and grace. And it shows that God's punishment, of course, like I said, is not just for destruction, but also for renewal as well. And it shows how amazing the Lord is truly to all humans in the case of trying to give them the will and the power. So, what do we understand this as a conclusion? From a spiritual viewpoint, Moab can be represented as people who became comfortable with their earthly things and forget dependence upon God. And so they forgot the dependence upon God. That's the key thing. They forgot that dependence. The chapter warns believers not to become spiritually careless, proud, or confident, or overconfident, of course, because confidence is a good key tool as long as we use it in the right manner. So becoming spiritually careless, proud, or overconfident was 3 things that we could not ever let our lives get twisted upon. So the main lessons from Jeremiah 48th chapter are clear. Trusting in human strength will fail, ultimately. Human strength is not the penultimate power that allows you to stay truthful or in pure strength, as pride is what fuels that. Pride is what leads to destruction. Spiritual ease can weaken faith, saying that, oh, we have done everything right, we can take a break from doing the actions that we have been doing to stay faithful. No, we have to always be faithful no matter the cause or the faith. Our actions can never evade from the truth. And then God's judgments finally are just. They are always done for the purpose of support, for the purpose of renewal, the purpose of teaching. And so God still remembers mercy and future restoration in every action and judgment God decides to put upon anyone. So Jeremiah 48th chapter teaches us to remain humble, watchful, and fully dependent on the Lord, for the Lord will guide us and the Lord will live and support for us if we pledge our will and trust in him. So that's all for this week's video, and we'll carry on seeing more about how these situations give us more understanding about how we stay truthful to the Lord, even in situations where we can fall apart. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Bye.